At my birthday party, my mom looked at me and made a scathing comment. "Jacob, you'll never be as good as your brother. Ryan is the one who repairs this family." I stood up, my heart pounding, and responded, "If that's so, from now on, let Ryan write all the checks. I won't send another dime." The room fell silent, my parents' eyes widening in astonishment. "What money? We've never caught a whiff from you." I pulled out my phone, opened my bank statements, and the bombshell that hit us left the entire family awestruck. My name is Jacob Miller, raised in Beckley, West Virginia, a small town ringed by lush green hills where everyone knows everybody like the back of their hand, and family stories are typically shared over simple meals. But my childhood wasn't that idyllic picture. It was a long string of days growing up in the shadow of unfair comparisons, where I was always the one coming up short, and my younger brother, Ryan, was the star nobody could beat. At an early age, I became used to being shoved aside, like I was a sidekick in my own family's play. Ryan, for years my junior, was born with a peculiar charisma, charming, lively, and adept at winning over grown-ups with his brilliant smiles or well-timed humor. He was the true golden child, adored by our parents and relatives like precious treasure. At every gathering, admiration was showered upon Ryan, while I sat quietly, hoping for a question or encouraging word that rarely came. My father, David Miller, was a coal miner, working day after day in damp, dirty tunnels, coming home with a face covered in coal dust and rough hands. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was often to praise Ryan. My mother, Susan Miller, worked as an accountant for a local company, always busy with ledgers and bills. Yet, she still found time to brag to the neighbors about her clever son. They didn't mean to hurt me, I know, but their favoritism built up over time, like layers of coal dust clinging to my father's skin. My parents often overlooked me for reasons that sounded reasonable but were really just excuses to justify their bias. I was reserved, shy, and not particularly great at making small talk. I tripped over my words when talking to relatives, while Ryan could have a whole room in stitches with a single joke. My academic performance was solid but never landed me big awards or shiny medals to show off. Ryan, though, was always praised for participating in every activity, from youth football to school plays, activities that made him the exception and the center of attention. I loved science fiction and tinkering with technology, spending hours with an old computer my dad bought at a second-hand market, taking it apart to figure out how it worked. But to my parents, it was mere doodling or burying my face in computers, as if my passion was something to be corrected. Those comparisons were an open sore in my heart, not bleeding, but throbbing each late evening. "You need to learn from your brother," my dad would mutter whenever I came home with my report card. Though my grades were steady, they were of no concern to them in light of the praise Ryan was getting. I was merely a shadow in his wake, a pale ghost nobody noticed or needed. I didn't despise Ryan. He was my little brother, and I loved him with genuine sibling devotion. But each comparison pushed me deeper inward, building an invisible wall to protect my fragile heart. One memory stays with me today. One Christmas afternoon, the family was gathered around the tree. Ryan sang Jingle Bells and got a round of applause. I sat there holding a homemade gift, a small LED light I'd made from spare parts, hoping my parents would like it. When I presented it, my mother looked at it and said, "You should spend more time with your brother instead of fiddling with these useless things." I nodded, swallowed my tears, and retreated to my room. In the darkness, I wondered, will I ever be good enough for them? Will I forever be that shadow? My childhood passed in moments like these, teaching me that love from family is often unfair and that invisible wounds can cause more pain than any knife. I found peace in books and technology, where nobody compared me to anyone else. Deep down, though, I still wished for the day my parents would look at me, truly see me, and realize I wasn't Ryan's shadow but Jacob, a person of his own worth, quiet and unique as I was. As I came of age during my teenage years, I thought things would be different, that I'd find my own slice of the sky where I could shine in my own way. But no, Ryan's shadow loomed larger and darker than ever. My high school years only confirmed the perception that I was invisible in my own home and the world around me. At Beckley High School, I remained the reserved Jacob with few close friends. I wasn't the type to easily fit in. The noisy hallways, the groups of friends giggling together, the school dances, they all felt alien to me. I'd rather sit alone in the library, flipping through books on electronics, or in the computer lab, typing my first lines of code on the school's ancient PC. I delighted in unpacking circuits or programming small programs. It was my secret pleasure. To my classmates, I was just that weird kid glued to his computer. To my teachers, I was a decent but unremarkable student, never drawing attention. Ryan was another story. He was a rock star with the student body. He played basketball, hosted school events, and could always make others laugh. Teachers loved Ryan, not just for his energy but for his ability to charm grown-ups. I once overheard my homeroom teacher talking to my mom during a parent-teacher conference. "Ryan is really a great student, always bursting with energy." My mom smiled, radiating as if she had received the compliment herself. Something was said about me in passing: "Jacob gets along, but he needs to be more assertive." I sat in the corner of the room, listening as my mom nodded, and it felt like another pebble thrown into my chest. At home, the comparisons grew sharper, as if my parents were determined to chisel into me that I'd never measure up to Ryan. "Look at your brother," my dad would say, his tone filled with pride whenever Ryan came home with a basketball medal or praise from a teacher. "That kind of energy is what makes people successful. You stay so quiet. What are you going to do?" My mom was kinder, but her words cut deeper. "Jacob, you need to learn to speak up, connect like your brother. If you're not good at handling people, it'll be tough to get far in life." I just nodded, never arguing, but each statement was another knife to an open wound, quietly bleeding. It's not that I wasn't trying. I stayed quiet, studied hard at school, maintained steady grades, and nurtured a dream of becoming an engineer. I loved engineering, the way circuits connected, the way lines of code created an efficient system, all logical and unbiased. There, I was worth something. I started researching colleges, especially West Virginia University, with its renowned engineering program. I fantasized about days spent in a lab, creating something of my own, proving I didn't have to be like Ryan to succeed. But I kept it to myself because every time I mentioned engineering, my mom would shake her head. "What good will all those machines do? You need to learn to connect like your brother." When I decided I should try to change, I joined the science club at school, hoping to do something that would make my parents proud. My team built a miniature model rocket, and we were chosen to present it at the school science fair. I practiced anxiously, hoping this time my parents would see me in a new light. But when the day arrived, Ryan had an important basketball game, and both my parents attended to watch him play. I stood on the stage presenting our rocket, glancing out into the audience and finding their seats empty. When I got home afterward, my mom only said, "I was busy watching your brother's game. Let me know ahead of time next time so I can arrange." I nodded, though secretly I knew there would be no next time. When I received the acceptance letter from West Virginia University for the electrical engineering program, it was as if a ray of light penetrated the long, dark tunnel of my existence. Standing before the university gates, admiring the imposing lecture halls and modern laboratories filled with cutting-edge equipment, I told myself, this is where I belong. College wasn't just a place to learn. It was a space where I hoped to shape who I was, to escape Ryan's shadow and prove I was worth something, even if in a different way. My first days in Morgantown were like a parched man finding a stream. I dove into my studies with zeal, loving the time spent in the lab tinkering with complex circuits or writing lines of code that made a small system work flawlessly. Every time one of my programs ran with "Hello, World" appearing on the screen, my heart thudded as if I had coded a world of my own. I didn't need an audience or applause but knew I was nearing my dream of becoming an engineer. As I plunged into homework and part-time jobs to pay for tuition, Ryan took a completely different route. He dropped out of school after 1 year, declaring that school was restrictive and wasn't for him. Instead, he dedicated himself to freelance business, working on projects that sounded impressive but were vague. He called home frequently, telling our parents about schemes for investments, high-level networking with city entrepreneurs, or life-changing plans he was working on. When he visited home, Ryan arrived like a star in crisp new shirts with the latest phone, telling stories of massive contracts he was about to sign. I looked at him, wondering how the money kept coming in when he didn't have a steady job. Our parents, as if reading from a script we'd all heard before, kept coddling Ryan. They complimented him, calling him a go-getter and a visionary. "Ryan dares to go out and risk it all," my dad said, his voice laced with pride as I remained silent, cradling my glass of water. "But you, Jacob, just holding a normal job. What will that do for you? You need to learn from your brother and set your sights high." Those words were like salt poured on an open sore, causing it to bleed silently. I yearned to shout that I was working hard, that I scrimped and saved every month to cover tuition, rent, and costly technical textbooks. But I stayed quiet, as I always did, knowing that speaking up wouldn't make a difference. What hurt the most was how my parents supported Ryan without considering my hardships to start his businesses. Ryan frequently asked them for money, sometimes for a promising computer app, other times to entertain business acquaintances at lavish dinners. My parents never hesitated to spend their savings or even borrow money to give it to him. "Ryan deserves this opportunity to shine," my mom said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Meanwhile, I had to manage on my own in college. Tuition, rent, food, books, everything depended on grueling part-time jobs. I worked at a coffee shop, washed dishes in a restaurant, and even fixed computers for dorm mates for extra money. Once, I hesitantly called my mom to ask for a small amount to buy a technical book required for a class. She sighed on the phone. "Things are tight, Jacob. I just wired funds to Ryan for his business. You'll have to manage." I hung up, sat in my rented room, looked at the stack of used books on my desk, and told myself I needed to do better. My college experience was like living as a machine, running between studying, working, and chasing my engineering dreams. I maintained high grades and earned an internship at a small technology company in Morgantown, where I worked with real engineers. Thrilled, I shared the news with my parents over the phone, hoping they would be proud of me. But my mom just mumbled, "That's good, Jacob. Stay independent." I never shared again after that, confiding only in close friends at school who appreciated the value of the code I wrote or the circuits I built. Ryan, though, kept boasting on social media, posting photos of himself next to shiny cars, checking in at luxurious bars, or displaying expensive watches with boastful captions like, "The road to success is never easy." I looked at those posts, wondering where the money came from when our parents, who'd saved their whole lives, couldn't even support him. At one point, I overheard my mom bragging to a neighbor about Ryan's huge project, her proud tone evident, while I was only mentioned as Jacob, who's in college, likely to be an engineer. Even from afar, Ryan's shadow overshadowed me. Every time I visited home, my mom would gush about his big plans while I got perfunctory questions. "How's school? Doing all right?" I answered briefly, knowing they didn't really care. I still cared about my family and loved Ryan, but the feeling of being invisible further distanced me. I reminded myself that I'd prove my worth, not through boasts but through achievements. I wanted to be a good engineer, to have a secure life, not to outshine Ryan, but to be myself. Jacob, a person of his own value, reserved and different as I might be. After 4 challenging years at West Virginia University, I graduated with a degree in electrical engineering and an offer letter from a technology company in Austin, Texas. Holding that offer letter in my hand, I felt as if the entire world was unfolding its wings before me. Austin was a booming city, a far cry from the quietness of Beckley, with its towering skyscrapers, hipster coffee shops, and bustling tech community. My new career in software engineering allowed me to work on exciting projects with great colleagues. My pay was decent, enough to live comfortably in Austin, but I lived frugally. I rented a small apartment, cooked simple meals, and spent most of my paycheck paying off the student loans still outstanding from college. I didn't need luxury vehicles or opulent clothes, the things Ryan always boasted about. Security was the greatest thing for me, something I'd worked toward with exhausting part-time jobs and sleepless nights of study. I wished to build a secure life, not just for myself, but so my parents could one day look at me with pride. But then, a phone call from Mom changed everything. Dad, after all those years of labor in the coal mines, had to retire early due to ill health. The years of inhaling coal dust had taken a toll on his lungs, and the doctor discouraged him from doing any heavy work. Mom, accustomed to her accounting career, went part-time due to her age and the stress involved. The family income dropped to a point where Mom was pinching pennies every month to make ends meet. Hearing her on the phone, full of worry as she talked about utility bills and Dad's medicine costs, made my heart ache. I decided to send money to support my parents every month. It wasn't an easy decision, living in Austin wasn't inexpensive. Yet, I couldn't just sit by and let them struggle. Every month, I set aside a portion of my salary, about $2,500, to help them make ends meet. I was determined to do it quietly, without making my parents think I was being showy or doing something grand. There was a catch, though. My parents, especially Mom, weren't familiar with bank transfers. They dealt with cash, and whenever I mentioned banking apps, Mom would say, "It's too complicated." I recalled Ryan, who still lived in Beckley, close to our parents. I called him, proposing what I thought was an easy solution. I'd transfer the money to his account, and he'd withdraw it as cash to give directly to our parents. "It's quick and simple," I said, and Ryan agreed right away, his voice bubbling with excitement. "Don't worry, big bro. I'll take care of it." I trusted Ryan. Although he lived a flashy life and was irresponsible at times, I still thought of him as my little brother, someone who wouldn't harm our family. Every month, I methodically sent the funds with a "for parents" note in the description. I didn't check on it or ask Mom if she'd received the money because I assumed it was a done deal. I just wanted them to live better, and I wanted to do this discreetly without anyone realizing I was the one behind it. I reasoned that even if my parents never realized my effort, at least I was doing my part as a son. My life in Austin was gradually falling into place. My career as a software engineer not only provided a reliable income but also brought me true happiness. I enjoyed mornings working in the office, sipping black coffee, typing code by a window with a view of the crowded streets below. But though I was far from home, my obligation to my parents was an inseparable part of me. Having resolved to send $2,500 a month to my parents by using Ryan's account, I continued working and living in Austin with a mindset of doing the right thing discreetly. I could envision my mom using that money to buy medicine for my father, fix the leaky roof, or simply live more comfortably. I didn't call to check how things were going because I trusted Ryan, my little brother, who grew up with me in our days in Beckley, to take care of the family on my behalf. That trust, in retrospect, was likely my greatest mistake. Occasionally, I called home and heard my mother complain about the cost of living. "Your dad's medication costs so much, Jacob," she said, her fretful voice trembling. "The roof is leaking again. Repairing it cost $1,000. My heart tightened at times like these. I increased the amount I sent back, sometimes $2,700, sometimes $3,000, even if it meant cutting back on my spending in Austin, eating out less often, or foregoing outings with friends. I didn't complain because I believed I was doing the right thing. I just wanted my parents to live in comfort, free of the hardships they endured to raise us. But while I was living frugally, Ryan was becoming increasingly lavish. On social media, I saw him flaunting a new car, a shiny SUV, a designer watch glinting on his wrist, and photos taken at trendy bars. He posted statuses brimming with bravado, big life, big work. I read those posts and wondered where the money was coming from when he was still freelancing with projects that were never precisely defined. But I brushed aside my doubts, telling myself that maybe he had finally succeeded, that his investments had paid off at last. I didn't want to believe the worst of my brother, though sometimes a nagging little voice in my head warned me that things weren't quite right. Amid my busy days in Austin, Emily entered my life like a shaft of sunlight. She worked in the company's marketing department, with a warm smile and eyes that seemed to listen. We started with short conversations during lunch breaks, where I mumbled about a stubborn coding problem and she spoke of a new advertising campaign. Gradually, evening coffee meetings brought us closer together. Emily was more than a girlfriend, she was my first true confidant. She helped me forget the long work hours, the sleepless nights worrying about money, and the lingering sadness of being compared to Ryan. One night, sitting on a park bench under the soft glow of street lamps, I told her about my childhood in Beckley, living in Ryan's shadow, and about sending money to my parents through him. Emily listened intently, then took my hand and said, "Jacob, you're doing a good thing caring for your parents, but you have to be more open. Tell them you're sending the money so they can see your heart." I smiled and brushed it aside. "No need to do that. I just want things to be discreet, simple." Emily shook her head, looking at me with concern. "You trust Ryan too much. Be careful. Not everyone is what they appear to be." Our dates with Emily turned into a healing balm. She took me to live music performances at intimate bars, taught me how to dance despite my clumsiness, and cooked intimate dinners with me in my apartment. Once, after I was exhausted from a project at work, Emily visited with a tray of freshly baked cookies, and we sat watching a comedy film, laughing until our sides ached. "You don't have to be like anyone else," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. "You're Jacob, and that's enough." Those moments lifted me up, as if Ryan's shadow was finally fading, replaced by the warmth of Emily's love. But her warnings about transparency stayed with me. I didn't want to believe Ryan was doing anything wrong. But his flashy pictures, the new car, and the lavish parties began to cause faint unease in me. I didn't know that this was leading me toward a painful truth, a truth that would erupt at my mother's birthday party, where my trust would shatter, and all I thought I knew about my family would be upturned. My mother's 65th birthday party was the first time I returned to Beckley after nearly a year of being busy in Austin. I wanted to give her something special to celebrate. I spent weeks working on a gift, a small digital camera, simple to use with a large screen and plain buttons, perfect for Mom, who had once talked about wanting to capture family moments and the daisies in her garden. I visited an electronics shop in Austin, trying out every model, carefully weighing the brands. Emily helped me test the features to ensure Mom would love it. "Your mom's going to love this," Emily grinned, her eyes sparkling as we wrapped the gift in green wrapping paper, Mom's favorite color, and signed a card that said, "Happy birthday, Mom, from Jacob and Emily." Emily offered to go with me to Beckley, not just for the party but also to meet my family. I was more nervous than ever. It was the first time I had brought a girlfriend home, and I wanted my family to see that I was different now, a mature Jacob with a stable job, a respectable life, and a wonderful girlfriend. As we flew from Austin, I sat next to Emily, gazing out the airplane window at the white clouds passing by. She took my hand and said gently, "Don't worry. Everything will be all right. I'm happy to meet your parents, even though they're a bit biased, as you said." I smiled, but my heart was heavy. I had told her about my childhood, about Ryan's shadow, about always being compared to him. But even so, I felt this party might be a chance to mend things, for my parents to see me in a new light without comparing me to him. The drive from the airport to Beckley took us along familiar roads where the green hills stood still, like boyhood memories. Our old family home appeared with its slightly chipped porch, weathered roof shingles, and Mom's small garden full of yellow daisies. I stepped out of the car, breathing deeply, inhaling the scent of wet grass in the familiar air. Emily grinned, pulling her small suitcase, looking as natural as if she were at home. I embraced Mom, noticing she was thinner than when I'd last seen her, with more silver in her hair. Dad sat in an armchair in the living room, coughing a couple of times. His face was pale from years of working in the mines, but he smiled when I appeared. I introduced Emily, and Mom embraced her, saying, "Come in. Don't be shy." Emily smiled, speaking warmly. "Thank you. I've heard a lot about you from Jacob." Ryan arrived soon after, stepping out of the kitchen in a crisp navy suit, white dress shirt, and a shiny watch on his wrist. He patted my shoulder, laughing loudly. "You're back, huh? Still the computer whiz. Never change." I grinned back, trying not to notice Mom's look, which quickly passed over me and settled on Ryan as if measuring us up. Emily leaned in and whispered, "Your brother certainly knows how to command attention." I nodded, remaining silent. The party was hosted in the living room, adorned with gold tinsel and balloons. The dining table was filled with cakes, homemade cookies, and a vase of daisies Mom had picked from the garden. Relatives gathered, and the room echoed with laughter and chatter. There was Aunt Laura, who always swooned over Ryan, Uncle Tom, who liked to regale them with tales of his youth, and a few close neighbors. Emily fit right in, talking animatedly with Aunt Laura about her career in marketing in Austin and how to develop an advertising campaign for the company. I sat observing her, proud and nervous. I wanted my family to understand that Emily was not just my girlfriend but someone who understood me, who made me feel valued. But then, like a familiar script, the conversation turned to Ryan. Aunt Laura, mid-sip of tea, turned to him, her voice laced with admiration. "Ryan, you're such a good son, sending money to your parents each month on schedule. This family is lucky to have you." Others nodded, adding their comments. "Exactly. That boy knows how to take care of his family. Not like some who live only for themselves." My heart tightened. Emily squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes warning, "Don't let it get to you." Mom, adding fuel to the fire, looked at me with disapproving eyes. "Jacob, why can't you be at least a fraction like Ryan? You should take lessons from him. Ryan is holding this entire family together. You know that." Her words, sharp as a knife, cut deep into wounds I'd tried to bury for years. Emily gripped my hand tighter, whispering, "Stay calm, Jacob. Don't let them hurt you." But I couldn't stay calm anymore. Years of restraining myself, years of hearing comparisons, years of sending money quietly without appreciation, it all exploded inside me like an uncontrollable fire. I jumped up abruptly, the wooden chair creaking loudly, shocking everybody. My voice trembled but was firm. "If that's how it is, from now on, let Ryan pay for everything. I'll stop sending money." The room fell silent, as if the air had been sucked out. My parents' eyes widened in shock. Dad, his voice weakened by sickness, spoke. "What money? We've never received anything from you." Mom nodded, her voice firm. "Jacob, stop spewing nonsense. You're working elsewhere, far away, never even thinking about us. When did you ever send us money?" I felt the blood rush to my head, a mix of pain and rage. Emily looked at me, her eyes anxious but encouraging. I took a deep breath, pulled the phone out of my pocket, and opened the bank app. My fingers scrolled through the transaction history, each line clear as day, $2,500 every month, sometimes $2,700, sometimes $3,000, all sent to Ryan's account with a note, "For parents." I held the phone up for all to see, my voice icy but steady. "Here, for the past 2 years, every month, I've sent money to Ryan to take care of you. You tell me I don't care. Why is this, then?" The room went silent. Mom's mouth fell open, her hands trembling as if she wanted to reach out to the screen. Dad sat up straight, his eyes wide. "Jacob, is this true?" Relatives began whispering, their admiring glances at Ryan turning to suspicion. Aunt Laura muttered, "My God, what is going on?" Uncle Tom, usually quiet, turned to Ryan, his tone stern. "Ryan, what is this all about?" Emily, unable to stay silent any longer, rose from her seat, her voice soft but determined. "Jacob has worked so hard to support this family. He didn't want to boast, but I think everyone needs to know the truth. He sent money every month, even though he had to live frugally in Austin, working day and night to earn it. I don't understand why there's been so much misunderstanding." She looked at me, her eyes giving me strength yet also filled with concern. You're not wrong, Jacob. They should know the truth, no matter how painful. The small living room of our home in Beckley, once filled with laughter and childhood memories, now felt like a tense stage for a dramatic play. The ceiling bulb's light cast shadows on the shocked faces of everyone present. The balloons and gold tinsel decorating Mom's birthday party seemed out of place in the heavy atmosphere. Mom sat there, hands trembling, eyes fixed on the phone screen I had just revealed, where the bank statements lay open in full view. Dad, with his poor health, sat upright, eyes wide with shock, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Relatives muttered to one another, their eyes flicking between me and Ryan, trying to process what had just happened. Mom spoke first, her voice trembling on the brink of breaking. You said the money was from you, Ryan, that you were providing for us. She looked at Ryan, her eyes full of both shock and anguish, as if part of the world she thought she knew had just collapsed. Ryan hung his head, his face red, his fists clenched. He said nothing, sitting there like a kid caught red-handed doing something wrong. I stood there, my heart pounding, not with anger but with a deeper pain, the pain of knowing that my little brother, whom I had trusted completely, had betrayed me. Emily looked at my mom, her expression sincere but firm. Jacob loves this family, and he doesn't deserve to be misunderstood like this. Her words were like a cool breeze, calming the storm of emotions churning within me. Dad, with his frail voice, glared at Ryan and demanded, "Speak, Ryan. What is this about that money? What did you do with what your brother sent?" His tone wasn't furious but carried a deep sadness, as though he had lost something precious. Ryan's head snapped up, his eyes avoiding mine. Then he stammered, I didn't mean to, Dad. I used it temporarily. I was going to repay it one day. He took a deep breath and, finally, unable to bear the weight of the stares upon him, confessed, I spent most of the money. I only gave you and Mom a small amount, a few hundred a month, so you'd think I was providing for the family. I needed the money to pay off debts, to maintain appearances. I didn't want you to be disappointed in me. The room fell silent again, but this time heavier, as if everyone was trying to process Ryan's admission. All that time I'd pinched and saved, lived frugally, worked overtime to send money home to my parents, it had all been used to fuel Ryan's image as the dashing son. I looked at him, searching for a glimpse of the little brother who used to chase me around the backyard to play catch, who shared a cookie Mom made with me. But before me now stood a young man, his face red with shame, his eyes avoiding mine. Emily, standing by me, spoke softly to the room. Jacob didn't want to make a fuss about this. He only wanted his parents to live in comfort without worry. But I believe from now on, things have to be clearer. Jacob has the right to be recognized, not for the money, but for his heart. She turned to me, her eyes soft. You make me proud, Jacob. I know you didn't want to boast, but today you had to stand up for yourself. Her words were like a refreshing breeze, dissipating the storm of emotions in me, but they also reminded me that if I had heeded her advice from the start, things might not have escalated this far. Ryan, after a long silence, finally spoke, his voice trembling. Jacob, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was caught in debt. My projects didn't turn out as I said. I lost money, accumulated debts, and I needed the money to keep up appearances so Mom and Dad wouldn't be disappointed. He hung his head, his voice choked. I made a mistake. I never thought things would go this far. His confession left me both angry and pitying, angry that he had lied to me and used me, but pitying because he was my brother, and I knew he was also a victim of his own expectations. The truth about Ryan slowly unraveled. The big projects he flaunted on social media, the SUV, the designer watch, the extravagant parties, they were all funded by loans, debts, and, worse, the money I sent for our parents. He had spent nearly all of it to support his flashy lifestyle, leaving our parents with only a few hundred a month, just enough for them to think he was the heroic son. I looked at him, my heart torn between sadness and disappointment. But more than anything, I realized the gap between us wasn't about personality, it was about honesty. Mom covered her face with her hands, sobbing. She seized my hand, her voice shaking. Jacob, I'm sorry. I didn't know you did as much as you did. I was wrong all these years. Dad, his voice weak, looked at me with eyes full of remorse. I was mistaken, Jacob. I always thought you didn't care about the family, that Ryan was the one watching over us. I never imagined this about you. He trailed off, as if he couldn't find the words. I saw his eyes redden, and for the first time in my life, I felt he truly saw me, not as Ryan's shadow, but as his son. The family members in the room, from Aunt Laura to Uncle Tom, began to murmur. Aunt Laura, who always praised Ryan, set down her teacup silently, her eyes bewildered. Uncle Tom looked at me, his voice low. Jacob, I didn't know you were quietly doing so much. I always thought, he trailed off, but his eyes, for the first time, showed a respect I had never seen before. A neighbor whispered, "Turns out Jacob's the one supporting the family." Who would have imagined? I looked at all of them, my heart swinging between pain and relief. The truth was finally out, but it didn't bring the joy I had expected. I only wanted my parents to live comfortably without worry. But now I realized that my trust had been betrayed, and my family had been complicated by dishonesty and bias. Ryan glanced up, his eyes full of remorse. "Jacob, I'll repay the money. I promise I'll make it right." But I wasn't sure if that promise was trustworthy. All I knew was that suddenly everything in our home had been irrevocably changed. I took a deep breath, trying to keep a controlled tone. "Mom, Dad," I began, my eyes sweeping across the room. "I didn't want things to come to this. All I ever wished was for you to live life carefree. But what has just happened has made me rethink everything. I can no longer go on as before." Mom looked at me, her eyes still full of tears, as if she wanted to say something, but I raised my hand to stop her. I had to say everything to set boundaries I had never considered before. "If you need me to keep supporting you," I said, my tone measured but resolute, "I have some conditions. First, I don't want to hear any more comparisons between Ryan and me. I've lived my whole life in his shadow, and I've had enough. I'm Jacob, not a poor imitation of Ryan." I looked at Mom, then Dad, my eyes not angry but firm. "Second, from now on, every expense must be transparent. I'll send money directly to you, or I'll pay the bills myself. I want to know my money is being spent on its intended purpose. And third, Ryan must contribute as well. If he wants to be part of this family, he must take responsibility, not just make empty promises." The room was still. Mom nodded slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Jacob, I agree," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "I promise I won't do it again. I just wanted our family to be at peace, but I did so many things wrong." Dad spoke up too. "I agree, Jacob. You're right. From now on, everything will be out in the open. We won't let this happen again." Ryan, still with his head bowed, finally looked up. His face was flushed, his eyes full of shame but also a glimmer of determination. "Jacob," he said, trembling, "I know I was wrong. I'm not just apologizing. I'll do better. I'll be productive. I'll help Mom and Dad, and I'll live responsibly." He looked at me, his eyes pleading for a second chance. "I don't want to lose this family, and I don't want you to hate me forever." His words, though I wasn't sure I could fully trust them, softened my heart. Emily, beside me, smiled weakly and whispered, "You did well, Jacob. Setting boundaries is necessary, and I'm sure your family will understand." She turned to Mom, speaking quietly. "Ma'am, I know this is hard, but Jacob wants only fairness and honesty in the family. He cares deeply for you and your husband." Mom nodded, grasping Emily's hand, smiling as though she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. What was supposed to be a joyous celebration had become a turning point for our family. Mom, after wiping away her tears, stood up and hugged me tightly. "My son, I'm so proud of you," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I'll never forget what you've done." Dad, unable to stand, grasped my hand, his eyes filled with gratitude. I felt a warmth in my heart, not because of the praise but because, for the first time, I felt my family's love untainted by comparisons. The birthday party ended quietly, with no one in the mood to cut the cake or raise glasses for a toast. Family members left one by one, whispers about Ryan and the truth that had just been revealed lingering in the air. Emily's hand clung to mine, her eyes an unflinching anchor amid the whirlwind of emotions. "Are you all right?" she whispered. I nodded, but deep down, I knew I needed time to come to terms with all this. The truth was revealed, leaving me with mixed emotions, relief that I was finally understood, but sadness that my trust in Ryan had been broken. I looked at Mom, Dad, and Ryan, my family, the ones I loved, and wondered if we could repair these cracks. In the following months, I returned to Austin and resumed my career as a software engineer, but with renewed determination. I would take care of my parents, but on my own terms with clear boundaries. I set up a joint bank account with Mom, teaching her how to access the balance through an app, though she still complained it was too complex. I sent money directly to that account, $2,500 monthly, sometimes adding extra when Mom mentioned unexpected expenses like fixing pipes or buying new medicine for Dad. But this time, I ensured everything was transparent. I gave Mom duplicate receipts, called to confirm she received the money, and asked for her confirmation. "I don't want the past to repeat itself," I told her on the phone, my tone gentle but firm. Mom nodded during the video call, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I understand, Jacob. I won't let it happen again." As they had promised, Mom and Dad began to change. They stopped comparing me to Ryan, no longer talking about the brighter younger brother or the pride of the family. Instead, Mom called often, asking about my work in Austin and the projects I was working on. "Being an engineer must be tough, huh?" she asked, her tone curious. For the first time, I sensed she was genuinely interested in my world of code and circuits. Dad, his health declining, started talking to neighbors about Jacob, the engineer in the city. After one call, his voice was warm. "I'm proud of you, Jacob. I was wrong not to see it sooner." Those simple, sincere words were like a balm to the wounds in my heart. Ryan, after what happened at the party, struggled to pick himself up. He told me his grand plans were nothing more than lost bets. He owed banks, friends, and even loan sharks. "Jacob, I tried so hard to succeed, to make Mom and Dad happy," he said over the phone, remorse dripping from his voice. "But I went down the wrong path." I didn't know how to console him, but I told him to find a steady job and start fresh. Ryan agreed, and for the first time, I saw him take his promise seriously. He got a job at an auto repair shop in Beckley with a modest wage, but enough to meet his needs and send a small amount to our parents. He sent $300 every month home, not much, but it was his first genuine attempt to live responsibly. Mom told me Ryan began spending more time at home, helping Dad repair the fence or taking her to the market. "He's trying, Jacob," she said quietly. "I know he was wrong, but I believe he'll change." I felt relieved, not only because of Ryan's efforts but because I had finally broken free from the weight of comparison that had suffocated me for years. I no longer felt the need to compete with him or prove my worth. I was Jacob, a software engineer, a son, a man who lived by his principles. My career in Austin flourished. I was promoted to project team leader, guiding a team of young engineers. Emily was always by my side, supporting me during hectic days and nights when I worried about my family. She became an essential part of my life, not just a confidant, but a reminder that I was deserving of love and respect. A year after that birthday party, Emily and I got married. We chose a small church on the edge of Austin with a warm atmosphere, soft light filtering through stained glass windows onto rustic wooden pews. Emily, with her refined sense of style, insisted on including white daisies like Mom's Garden, and an acoustic band playing soft love songs like Can't Help Falling in Love. I wanted a quiet wedding, but Emily made it a heartfelt, unforgettable day with small details that left me beaming: handwritten notes for guests, a dessert table with homemade cookies, and a photo booth with a wooden frame inscribed with our names. "This is our day, Jacob," she said, her eyes sparkling. "But it's also a day your family can see how happy you are." Ryan arrived, less flashy than before, no longer wearing designer watches or suits. He embraced me, saying, "Congratulations, Jacob. I'm trying to be a better person." I nodded, not mentioning the past, but in my heart, I hoped he would keep his promise. The wedding was filled with joy, free of favoritism or comparison. Aunt Laura and Uncle Tom, along with other Beckley relatives, attended and spoke of me with genuine respect. "Jacob's really a great son," Aunt Laura said, her eyes no longer fixed on Ryan as they once were. I smiled, feeling the fairness I had waited for my whole life. When Emily appeared in her white wedding dress, my heart stopped. She looked like a vision, her hair flowing gently, her eyes twinkling under the church's light. The band played a sweet acoustic melody, and as she walked toward me, taking my hand, I knew this was not just a new beginning for me but for our family. The ceremony was full of joy, free of comparisons and bias, only reunion and love. As we exchanged vows, I looked into Emily's eyes and said, "I vow to love and cherish you the way you reclaimed me from darkness." Emily smiled, her voice husky with emotion, and said, "I vow to stand by your side, Jacob, no matter what." We placed rings on each other's fingers, and when I kissed her, applause erupted from family and friends. I glanced at my parents, Mom wiping away tears, Dad beaming, and Ryan leaning against a corner, giving a slight nod of approval. My family, once fractured by favoritism and dishonesty, was slowly finding its way to love, fairness, and honesty. Years later, Emily and I built a life filled with happiness. We bought a small house in Austin with a garden where Emily grew daisies like Mom's in Beckley. I continued working at the tech firm, and Emily started a small marketing consultancy where she thrived with creativity and passion. We visited my parents with small gifts, a new camera for Mom, a comfortable armchair for Dad. My parents now greeted us with smiles and stories no longer centered around Ryan. They talked about Mom's garden, Dad's health, and asked about our life in Austin. "As long as you're happy, I'm happy," Mom said, her eyes free of any favoritism. Ryan, after years of struggle, finally found his path. He paid off his debts through steady work at the auto repair shop and later opened a small garage in Beckley. His business grew, not the grand projects he once boasted about, but enough for him to take pride in his success. He continued sending $300 a month to our parents, sometimes more when he could. He began making up for past mistakes, not just with money but with actions, fixing the roof for our parents, taking Dad to doctor's appointments, or simply having dinner with them. He called me, his voice sincere. "Jacob, I know I made a mistake, but I'm trying to be someone you can be proud of." I smiled over the phone. "Keep trying, Ryan. I believe in you," and for the first time, I truly believed he could do it. Our lives as brothers, once divided by favoritism and deception, found balance. I no longer lived in Ryan's shadow, and he no longer chased unattainable dreams. Our family, imperfect as it was, had learned to love each other fairly and truthfully. Looking back on my life, from the shy kid in Beckley to the fulfilled man by Emily's side, I knew that family bonds are only as strong as the honesty and fairness they are built upon. Fairness must exist in love if it is to be a haven rather than a wound that's hard to heal. Only when each person is valued for who they are can a family endure as a place to return to rather than a shadow that binds.